Welcome to another edition of the Civ Battle Royale. My name is Dawkinzz and this is episode 27, Smoke on the Water. As war rages across the cylinders, coasts, and riverlands, desperate civs struggle for peace, glory, and survival. Starting on turn 421, let's get right into this. Hey paisanos, welcome to another episode of the Civ Battle Royale. My name is user Vivala Homestar, otherwise known as Vivala, or Vivala. I'm an occasional poster on both the sub and Discord, but I'm probably best known for creating the mod for our resident thick boys, the Métis. I'll try my best to keep my extreme bias locked away. Anywho, let's get started. As always, user Varia provides us with a map faster than many of us can process the part's events. Compared to episode 25, you can see the smaller empires start to disappear. Qing and the Aztecs and the Quiquero all lost major chunks of territory, and Canton and the Golden Horde are being citadeled. For our second map, I'd like to draw attention to the lore map created by Laxaraxariscal, and what the hell are you doing? This map has everything from founding dates to peak population and IRL location, but the coolest part is the fact that practically every single city was given a bit of lore, as the name suggests. My favorites include a justification for how a city on the coast of Greenland got named Green Lake, and how the Palmyran city of Garasa grew wealthy by selling weapons to both sides of the Gothic Horde Wars. Great stuff. For this week's original content, let's take a look at user A Redundant Sofa's extremely blurst art of Lavalleja reading last week's part. I'm terrified. We should all be terrified. Uruguay will be back next week, they said. Putting them at number 2 was a mistake, they said. Well, look who's back to laugh at those claims. The Iroquois. While I haven't seen the slide proper at the time of writing this, I can only assume this is due to the Iroquois' stellar production and prowess in war. Sure, Uruguay could theoretically break out to the north if the Quiquero fall, but the Iroquois are currently making actual gains in the war against the Apache. That's not to say Uruguay isn't terrifying, just that the Iroquois are even more so. We open in the heart of the Amazon. After surviving thousands of years of warfare against the Great Gwei, the Quiquero may be facing their end. Nazcan planes and artillery have bombarded the final stronghold of Hueluguhiti into the red. That being said, Quiquero units surround the city, and there are only a few Nazcan melee units at the front. This will be a tough situation to get out of, but if anyone can, it's the Quiquero. We return to the Goth-Prussian War and find Vladimir more or less how we found it at the end of last episode, albeit with both sides' armies looking a bit thinned out. I think the Goths are the stronger of the two right now, especially since they have 18 planes right at the front, but it's a little hard to gauge their strength because there's so many great people mixed in. Seriously, I counted roughly 7 Gothic generals on this slide. Alaric better hope Algerian levels of general spam don't lead to Algerian levels of success. Meanwhile, Uruguay buffs its already ludicrous science and happiness with the Hubble telescope and Sky Tower. With over a fourth of the world at war with them, the Sulknums start to worry that maybe they've taken the whole Eldritch worship shtick a bit too far. Guys, no, you don't get it, a Sulknum sailor shouted as Kiwi pirates began boarding their ship. It's a coming-of-age thing. We dress up like spirits so boys can fight us and become men. But the New Zealanders don't speak Ona, so they just shoot them before proudly declaring they've saved the world and returned to their ship. Here's a good look at the recently de-Iroquoi'd Caribbean. Uruguay is making quick work of filling its oceanic claims with units, both naval and embarked. Haiti has an admittedly outdated carpet here. It seems dense enough so that they could give Venezuela trouble for a while if they went to war, but nothing that could save them from ultimately being destroyed by their neighbors. Meanwhile, Ablai Khan joins the coalition of leaders who are 100% convinced that Cthulhu is real, officially dubbed Leaders Opposed to Violent Evil Creatures and Resisting All Forms of Terror, or Lovecraft for short. War rages between the Haida and the greatest civ in the game. The Haida and the Métis. Louis Riel has successfully managed to capture Dawkinzz, and with only 2 Haidan units anywhere near the city, it looks like he'll keep it for the time being. However, there looks to be the end of Riel's western campaign, while the Haidan land army is almost non-existent, and the combination of the Métis front line and air force may be enough to flip one more city. There is no way Riel can take on that monster of a navy. Speaking of, Koya really needs to start making good use of that navy if he wants to keep relevant. Maybe that war with Korea will give him enough of a foothold in Asia to start going wild. Although, I don't know if Korea has any coastal cities, but I could be wrong. The Admiral told us the world wanted us dead, so it was time to take what we could to shield the motherland. He told us it would be easy. Get some island outposts to quickly surrender so future generations could launch ships from their harbors. Maybe our fleet would have been enough on our own, but no matter where we go, we're greeted by the same thing. An eerie black flag rising over the horizon, cannon fire from all sides, and a panicked rush to safer waters. I fear we won't take a single city so long as these blasted Kiwis lurk about the Pacific. Journal of a Selknam sailor found washed up in Tonga. Beta Israel prepares to take back Waleka with a rifleman as Gondar takes damage for what may be the first time. The Beta Israeli Corps has always benefited from the production of the African Great Lakes and the mountainous Ethiopian highlands, but Zimbabwe can now bypass that with the power of parachutes. That, plus the lack of units in IRL Somalia, gives me little confidence in Gudet's ability to make a comeback. Matota figures he may as well join Lovecraft to offset all the penalties he's receiving for his northern conquests. Here we get a nice shot of the Métis Corps, and get ready for the shocking revelation, it's mostly devoid of troops. Riel isn't exactly known for carpeting, and with his army currently focused on charging into the Pacific, there's not much left to fill the Corps. That shouldn't be a huge problem for the Métis right now, however, as the Iroquois are on friendly enough terms to have open borders, and the Apache are busy with the Iroquois. Speaking of the Iroquois, let's look at the southern portion of their empire. Soon to be incorporated into said empire are Shishinde, which is about to be pincered by well over a dozen units, and Chuk-Anen, which is firmly in the black. Like the Métis, the Iroquois actual corps is looking a bit sparse, though still more modern and militarized than Riel's prairie lands, since the bulk of the Iroquois army is trying its darndest to wipe the Apache off the map. Also, look at the size of those cities. Montreal and Chichinde both sit at 50 population, and Schoharie has a whopping 66. It's no wonder the Iroquois now have the top production on the cylinder. Not only have the Kamluks failed to make any progress towards capturing Calcutta and Jaipur, but India actually looks like it has a chance to retake Madurai. To be fair, it's hard to expect much from the Kamluks here when they're fighting in cities barely connected to the rest of their empire, which are located in the most mountainous terrain on the cylinder. Quit while you're ahead, Jamaica. Those cities aren't falling until you either heavily invest in paratroopers and XComs or manage to take a bite out of the southern Kazakh empire. Meanwhile, Riel reveals that he's discovered nuclear weapons. It's all part of his plan to take on the Iroquois and retake his title as thickest civ in North America. After a decade of fighting, it feels like we finally got a handle on the Kiwi menace. They're still a threat, but we are fairly certain we outnumber them in this region. The Admiral says that if we just keep fighting, we'll be rid of them soon. By Kenos, I hope so. I was promised glory for my people, but all I've done since setting sail is narrowly avoiding death by sailors of the Jolly Fern. Even if we do win, what happens? Is our fleet enough to take a city, or will we all be reduced to driftwood by their bombards? Or maybe King Dick will conjure another fleet and slaughter us all. I fear this whole affair will be pointless. Journal of a Selknam sailor found by a passing Uruguayan fleet. You may recall that the Moors were never mentioned last part, and now we can see why. They're not really doing much. Moorish Africa isn't exactly carpeted, and the vast majority of Rahman III's land units here are artillery. Not to mention Madagascan peacekeepers make up a concerning portion of the units on this slide. Jesus Christchurch, look at all those privateers. Something tells me the Sulknam sailors up north won't be done with King Dick's fleets anytime soon. This navy stands, or floats, in stark contrast to the empty Australian coasts. The citizens of Meanjin and Kalgoorlie better watch out when Australia versus New Zealand 4 rolls around. Also, everyone say hi to the Siempre squad chilling out around Kavanbah. The people of Vladimir have suffered enough. It's time to goo up the gears of war, shouts a peacekeeper as his units plunge into Prussian territory. Fortunately for the dignity of his people, that catchphrase never caught on. The peacekeepers haven't completely stopped the war yet, as Alaric was wise enough to instate closed borders, but they're certainly making it difficult for both sides to get to the front. The unhappiness problem that was plaguing the cylinder for so long is long gone for many of our top civs. Uruguay is particularly notable as they shot from 197 happiness at the end of last part to 275 thanks to the Sky Tower. Zenobia meanwhile smiles not because of the happiness of her people, but because of the news from her scientists. Palmyra has developed nukes. Venturing back to North America, we get another look at the Apache-Iroquois War. Venezuela is fighting the Iroquois too, and they brought their navy to show they mean business. Too bad Jaketown is an inland city. As for the Apache, you can see just how much they've been drained by resisting the Iroquois' advance. They're producing enough units to avoid a complete collapse, but I don't see them mounting a comeback anytime soon. The defense of Huelo Guhiti is withering away, and several hexes are wide open to take the city from. Anetu takes what might be his last stroll through the jungle, wondering if Nazca will at least give mercy to the trees. These green gates have kept the cylinder safe for millennia. What a mistake it would be to tear them down. Rial's planes have been doing a great job of bombing Haydn's cities into the yellow. He now just has to, actually get into melee range with one. Also of note, the Métis appear to have open borders with the Apache in addition to the Iroquois, so they can at least keep committing to this campaign without worrying about an invasion from the south. To bolster its current peacekeeping efforts, Tongu proposes the World's Fair. Maybe if the world could just see human ingenuity at its finest, everyone would decide to stop fighting. Algeria, meanwhile, attempts to use its clout to ban pearls. Other leaders were quoted saying, "Wait, what's in Algeria again?" Also, the Tongu World Fair is clearly a way for them to demonstrate their favorite new product, flubber. That's right, I'm still keeping this going until it catches on. Alaric cares about Bai Nong's dream of peace about as much as he does about the lives of Prussians, which is to say, not at all. He flips Vladimir, but brought so few troops with him that Prussia will almost definitely take it back next turn. And with the GU peacekeepers pushed far north of the front, it looks like the city will flip back and forth for a while. I'd never expected to travel this far south, and certainly not while escorted by a group of fascist lumberjacks. But the Emir says this Lovecraft stuff is important, so here we are. The Sulknam we fought looked terrified. Allah only knows what their dark god has done to their psyche. I saw the towers of a dark city looming over the southern horizon, but the captain says we don't have the strength to capture it. Good. If I had to stay down here occupying some eldritch necropolis, I'd surely freeze to death. Journal of a Moorish sailor recovered by the Haitian Navy. I don't see what's so scary about these Sulknam folk. Even if they do got some fish god on their side, King Dick will just wipe them out with a great Kiwi armada. It's worked so far, huh? Anyways, we're about to make landfall, and besides, rumors of some troops that can walk on water. Pretty sure the boys are just messing with me about that one. Nothing seems too weird. I figure we'll get a foothold on the continent in no time. Letter from a Kiwi sailor. What Uruguay failed to do in thousands of years, the Nazca did in 3 parts. The final Kwikoro city has fallen, and with no melee units in sight, I can safely say this is it. The Kwikoro played a uniquely important role as a turtle. Whereas most defensive civs lurk in their own corner of the world, staying out of the spotlight until a much more advanced civ takes them out, the Kwikoro had the job of containing the cylinder's strongest, some would argue overpowered civ within the continent, with some small exceptions. If the Nazca are smart, they will honor the Quicuro's legacy by letting the Jade Gates of the Jungle stand for millennia more. If they don't, well, Uruguay will show us just how important the South American turtle really was. F. Gondar is now under Zimbabwean control. Beta Israel could maybe liberate the city with that rifleman, but this outdated, mostly ranged army is only going to hold Zimbabwe back for so long. With their gargantuan production, the Iroquois easily take the top spot in the World's Fair, which should help them quickly fill out any remaining ideological tenets. Also pictured, the Kamugs have nukes. This will surely be terrifying the moment Jamuka wakes up. The Nazca quickly pump units into former Quicuro territory before Uruguay can get any funny ideas. Meanwhile, what may be the last two Quicuro units flee the burning city of Huelagohiti. The field gun runs for Uruguayan territory, hoping humility will be enough to win Lavalleja's favor. Anetu, disguised as a drummer, is smuggled out of a town with a local band. They settle at a holy site, hoping Kawachi cares enough not to violate its sanctity. "You idiots, how could you let one slip by?" The Selknam Admiral screams into a phone as he takes shelter from the cannon fire in Santa Teresa del Tuy. He nearly drops the phone at the response. "They have how many ships?" "Fight them off if you can, and send a ship my way so I can get off this doomed rock." The Beta Israeli Navy manages to capture Kopje, completely bypassing the Tongu blockade. Zimbabwe should have an easy time taking it back, at least once they realize helicopters can't capture cities. They're having similar problems up in Gorgora, where a combination of Tongu and Madagascan peacekeepers have blocked everything but a Zimbabwe helicopter from reaching the city. A Haydn Marine manages to slip through the Métis line and capture Kassan. Real can take it back, but his army grows thinner with every turn, and Haida's coastal defenders are being trained as fast as the Métis guns can kill them. He decides to peace out with the Selknam, declaring that Lovecraft is nothing but a distraction. The real coastal menace is in our backyard. Every day, the Kiwi menace grows closer to our shores. We're causing damage where we can, but if this keeps up, they'll be battering our cities in no time. I wish Cthulhu were real. Then he could just wipe out New Zealand and let us live in peace. This call from a Selknam sailor to his wife was overheard by Kiwi spies. The only words they understood were New Zealand and Cthulhu, which was enough to convince Sadan to send even more ships. Haida retakes Dawkinzz, putting the Métis at a net loss of cities for this part. Look, Riel, I want to convince everyone that you're strong, that one day you can rise against the Iroquois menace, but you're making it really hard when you struggle this hard to invade your neighbor. Zimbabwe manages to get a couple more helicopter gunships to Gogora, with a couple paratroopers creeping closer. Meanwhile, Haiti decides to back out of Lovecraft. Your contributions will be missed. Here's a nice look at the narrow strip of international water just southeast of Japan. It seems Shikoku is really enthusiastic about submarines. We also get a brief glance at what little fighting there is, the Canton-Haida War. Not even the frozen wastelands of northern Greenland are safe from Hiawatha's wrath. If either anti-aircraft gun can make it to Hockey, then the city will surely be his. Also pictured, a single Minoan ship and more Scottish units than I expected to be alive. The Iroquois sailor was surprised when he was given the orders to sail south. "I don't think this will be enough to capture any Selknam cities, sir." Hiawatha shook his head. "That's not the point. I just want you to cause chaos. Make those sailors' lives miserable. I want those ships to go home and report that I am the one they should be scared of, not Lavalleja." It seems Matota's decision to join Lovecraft wasn't completely for show, as he sends his own dispatch to thin out the Selknam navy. The Beninese sailors will eventually return home and give a terrified report, not on the Eldritch Selknam, but on the Zimbabwean ships in Uruguayan territory. The friendliness between their two highest-ranked neighbors cannot lead to good things. Prussia takes back Vladimir, but the Gothic Air Force almost guarantees that it will flip again soon. Now is a good time to take a look at Muscovy as well. Among the citadels and border gore, you might notice that a couple of their units are sitting in a Gothic exclave, showing that they're on good enough terms for open borders. For anyone hoping the Goths were going to just finish the job, it looks like you'll just have to keep on waiting. And yes, I see that peace notification. We'll get to it eventually. As expected, Shishinde easily fell to the Iroquois. Now their army marches forward towards a line of cities that have all been bombed into the black. While Geronimo has a solid line of warbands defending the southern portion of the front, I suspect the reason these cities are still Apache has less to do with their defense and more to do with Hiawatha's choice to bring mostly bazookas to the front. Geez, I never realized how citadeled the Qin capital was. If the Kamlooks ever decide to attack the Qin, the city would be theirs immediately. Also advantageous for the Kamlooks is the relative emptiness of the former Qing lands. One bit of hope for Qin enthusiasts, however, is their melee unit of choice, the paratrooper, especially since, as we saw in India, the Kamlooks struggle with rough terrain. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen the Australian Corps like this. It may also be our first look at Australia's unique unit, the SASR en masse. This is a paratrooper replacement with extra drop range that gains science from kills. It's also stronger when researching a tech no one else has, but looks at Uruguay. I don't think that's happening. Anyways, this carpet should be enough to assuage any fears about Aussie power that fans may have had a couple of parts ago. The Sulknam Admiral, bogged down with skirmishes in the Antarctic colonies and an invasion in the west, has little time to guide the forces in the east. Instead, he sends the same message every morning: hold the line with your life. The world enters the future era with the Uruguayan capital predictably taking the title of greatest city. The Iroquois may be ranked first in the PR, but Uruguay is still the top dog in techs and wonders. Here's a look at the 4 civs of Kamchatka, including the Qing, whose holdings have been relegated to this frigid peninsula. The Haida-Korea War is going very, very glacially slowly, but it's hard to blame them when their border is so narrow. While roughly a quarter of the world's leaders believe Cthulhu is definitely 100% real, very few believe in the mysterious entity dubbed the Nanettes. Even those who have declared war on these mysterious people, such as Rial, eventually decide their existence is a myth and make peace. The Nanettes, well aware of how woefully outdated their muskets are, would prefer to keep it that way. Maybe everyone will just forget about them and they can live in peace for the rest of time. Hawaii remains a heavily divided region. Shikoku, the dominant military force on the islands, attempts to promote the legitimacy of its claims to the entire chain by inviting tourists from Tonga, New Zealand, and Cordoba into its waters. Predictably, the Goths take back Vladimir, but this time they also manage to snag Bromberg. Prussia will take it back pretty much immediately, but this does possibly signify that the Goths are gaining the upper hand. Meanwhile, Uruguay constructs the CN Tower, which will give them a hefty boost to population. "I won't let you use these fiendish pipes to raise your dark god," screams a Moorish sailor as he hops aboard the Sulknam dinghy. One quick shot with a flintlock later, the musician lays dead on the deck and the sailor holds the flute in his hands. "Today I am the savior of the world," he says proudly before snapping it over his knees, perhaps releasing some kind of dark spirit into the world. Alright, the sea is free of that devilish armada. It's time for the Fen to fly over South American soil. Last words of a Kiwi pilot before being shot down. Haiti has filled the waters around Florida and the Bahamas with privateers. This would be more impressive if the Iroquois and Uruguay weren't its neighbors. I do wonder why there are far fewer boats around Port Lamar. Maybe they keep vanishing in the Bermuda Triangle. Look at this mess. The Turks are split in half and citadeled into oblivion, but not so much that Venice gets to have contiguous land borders. Then you have Palmyra, which borders the similarly colored HRE, and the border is especially hard to make out because they have open borders. Add on to that a swath of peacekeepers of many nationalities, and you get a region that's impossible to comprehend. Here's hoping Venice and Palmyra do some spring cleaning soon. Also, Zimbabwe pieces out of Lovecraft after a single mission. Speaking of messy regions, here's Northeast Asia once again. The Haida have managed to damage Gwangju, but it really doesn't seem like they'll get much further. While we're here, say hi to the Evanks because we won't be talking about them again this part. So long. We thought we were done for, but then the Zimbabweans just sort of turned around and began sailing away. You think everyone's realized that we're not weird devil worshippers? Maybe this is the end of our long war. Maybe the suffering can be over. Quote from a Selknam sailor calling home, moments before disaster. Rial, furious at the lack of progress against the Haida, demands his troops begin bombing Ninstins. One general suggests that perhaps they should focus their fire on cities that melee units could actually capture. That man was promptly dropped from a plane on Ninstens. That's right, Venice, and Muscovy I guess, have declared war on the Turks. Venice certainly has the firepower to win the war. Bursa is already in the yellow, but the mix of geography and peacekeepers may make the task very difficult. Another shot of the conflict shows that Venice is also dealing solid damage to Edirne, but has no land units to capture it, unfortunately. We also get a better view of a Venetian privateer near Bursa that was hidden behind the notifications last slide. If this ship can survive a little longer, then Bursa will surely flip. After decades of fighting, we finally got our boys to the gates of one of their cities, and it looks pretty normal, to be honest. But that's gotta be some kind of dark secret hidden here somewhere, right? Some rituals we're not seeing? I mean, we've been going after these cultists for ages. There's no way old Seddon would have gone this far and been wrong. Of course not. Letter from an Anzac at the front in Okangala. This makes me sad. The Iroquois army slams into the Apache front line and they look ready to take La Payende at any moment. From this angle, it looks like the Iroquois have plenty of units to spare while the Apache lands are barren beyond the front line. The Iroquois advance is also bad for the Métis, whose border with the Apache is shrinking, along with its chances to strike at its southern neighbor. The waters south of Jaketown are swarming with privateers, both Apache and Venezuelan. You have to wonder what they think they're accomplishing. Is killing the occasional embarked unit really worth such a huge naval investment? The Venetian ships near the Turkish cities have mostly vanished and were replaced by ships from the Sami? I think this might actually put an end to Venice's invasion. Congratulations to the Sami, Nubia, Zimbabwe, and the Siempre squad on your successful peacekeeping operation. Bromberg and Vladimir flip back to Prussia, who has managed to push the Goths back into their territory. Also, it's only been 6 turns since our last look at this war, but there's suddenly 13 Zimbabwean peacekeepers in Prussian territory in this slide alone. Meanwhile, the Haida and the Sami develop nukes. Oh my. Rial finally listens to reason and focuses on some capturable cities, taking back Kasan. Dawkinzz still remains in hidden hands, however, and a couple units look primed to snatch Kasan right back, likely wiping out 6 Métis planes in the process. That's a lot of alliteration. This violence sends shivers down the spines of the Shikokan peacekeepers that recently arrived at the southern end of the front. We may never truly keep the peace until the Eldritch Menace is destroyed, declares a Shikokan captain in Lovecraft strategy meeting. We saw that your privateers are hanging back. Are you not going to try and take the city? Asks a New Zealander sailor. The captain shakes his head. Saving the world is reward enough for me and my men. And we're supposed to trust your word? Technically, we are at war, you know, shouts another New Zealander. You will be dealt with later. For now, let us focus on the bigger threat. As I predicted back on slide 10, India took Madurai back from the Kamugs. The Kazakhs snagged Jumla from Nepal, fragmenting the empire and reducing it to 5 cities. Parthia seems poised to take Bangalore, though it looks like they only have 1 melee unit in the vicinity. This could be a great opportunity for Muscovy to prolong its demise. Just wait for Parthia to kill off its own melee unit and put the city in the black, then snipe it with a Streltsy. Despite the Métis bombs raining down on Kung, the Haida retain a solid control over the southern portion of their empire. In fact, their army looks stronger than it was at the beginning of the episode. Shikoku will make it difficult for them to push into Métis territory, but they'll certainly keep their own turf safe. We couldn't find anything otherworldly in Onkangala, but King Dick insisted we keep it under our control so the cultists don't flee there when we finally catch them. Guess we'll check Ham Ham, or whatever it's called, next. These cultists can't run forever. Quote from a New Zealander sailor calling home, and I really hope that this accent is good for you. Because I'm going into it again. I hear the Selknam are beginning to crumble up north, but down here they're relentless. We've been attacking these tiny island cities for God knows how long, and all I've managed to do is get frostbite. You gotta wonder if the Northern Fleet is enough to take them out, or if we're gonna have to wait until the Technomancer Lavayeha gets off his rear and saves us all. Journal of a New Zealander Sailor. Vladimir falls to the Goths and Bromberg is in the black. The Prussian-Gothic War doesn't change, but something else sure has. The number of Zimbabwean peacekeepers on this slide has more than doubled since we last saw this region only 3 turns ago. Matota, please. Shikokuan peacekeepers help the Kazakhs hold onto Jumla, though Nepal still stands a chance of slipping by and retaking it. Even though the Kazakhs can't push farther due to the peacekeepers, Ablai Khan is happy to bomb Kathmandu into the black. Maybe he's trying to send a message to the Tongu troops across the border. Parthia, as predicted, couldn't keep its melee unit around long enough to take Bangalore, leaving it wide open for an opportunistic Muscovite or Chin snipe. Today was a bittersweet day. We finally drove our enemies out of our eastern waters, but before we could even stop to celebrate, we heard the news of Okangala. A friend from Prussia asked me why it was such a big deal. Cities are captured all the time. That's just war, right? For most, maybe, but for us, it's still such a new, raw pain. Only the Venezuelans have captured our cities, and only in one war. Is that true? We spend our lives under the belief that our world is safe, but a new generation has had to learn that that is a lie. Journal of a Selknam Sailor. Despite its successful air raids, Venice remains firmly locked out of capturing any Ottoman cities, unfortunately. As frustrating as this must be for Dandola and for the rest of us, he should be more worried about the Zimbabwean peacekeepers covering Italy, outnumbering his own ground troops. As we saw last slide, Iadni and Hiawatha have decided to call it quits on Lovecraft. Meanwhile, the Kiwi raids on the Selknam coast have begun to peter out. When an advisor asked him about the withdrawal, Hiawatha remarked, "King Dick didn't find Cthulhu, did he? Sounds like we were all duped. And if he is real, we can let Lavayeha waste his troops on that problem. For now, I've got an empire to build." The Kamugs managed to take Madurai back, but the valleys are so stuffed with units that this may be the end of the conflict. While we're here, I'd like to note that, according to the minimap, Vladimir and Kasan have continued to flip back and forth, even while our attention is not on them. To wrap up this part, let's finally check out the peace deal between Zimbabwe and Beta Israel only 36 slides after it first came up. Leveraging its gigantic military, Zimbabwe was able to strike a peace deal that devastated Beta Israel. Gadut lost all 3 of her cities in IRL Somalia, which accounted for a third of her empire at the start of this part. Beta Israel is now left with 5 cities, assuming Zimbabwe got Kapche back, only 2 of which are now on mainland Africa, and none of which are connected by walkable Beta Israeli territory. There are certainly worse off rumps, but any chance the Civ had of staying at all relevant were just crushed by Zimbabwe. And on that depressing note, big thanks to the Blue Cassette for letting me narrate this part, Dawkinzz, that's me, for doing the audio narration, and sorry if this comes out to be super long, and to you, dear reader, for reading. This has been Vivala, and remember, Métis best Civ. And with that, thank you all for joining us again this week. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please like and subscribe. And until next week, we'll see you next time.